Welcome on stage our next speaker, Edoardo Dusi. Now you can go ahead. Thank you, Edo. Just a thing about you, something you told us that you love metaverse, right?
Sure.
But reality is still the best place where to find a good pizza, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go ahead and can introduce yourself. I'm sure you will do it in your at the beginning of your talk. So please, again, a round of applause for Edoardo Dusi.
So let's see if anything else is broken in my talk today. So testing Angular apps with Cypress in CI. I will not teach you how to use Cypress. You will not go home tonight knowing how to use Cypress, the Cypress API, or how to integrate Cypress into your app. I want to talk with you about the importance of having end-to-end tests in your app. But I will also provide a demo of a Cypress integration in your Angular app and your continuous integration. But what I think is most important right now is to understand why you should add end-to-end tests to your app, why it's important. Okay, I am this guy, and you can find me with the Edoardo Dusi nickname on social media. I'm a lead developer at SparkFabric. We are hiring, of course, so if you want, check the careers page on the SparkFabric website. And I'm a podcaster noob, so if you're interested in IT, I broadcast almost daily with 5 or 10 minutes in Italian, but I talk about the IT news that interested me and add some comments. Okay, so if you want, check it out. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, whatever. And also, there's another podcast that's way better. It's Continuous Delivery. It's the podcast of SparkFabric. We started this podcast a couple of years ago. It's a live podcast. We have a podcast of about an hour with special guests, and we talk about IT. And this year, we will start again. That's worldwide news. We'll start again on October 25 with 3 special guests, and I promise it will be amazing. So check it out. So the agenda for this talk. Why should we write end-to-end tests? First thing. And then end-to-end tests in Angular, of course, with Cypress, and then a little demo. I want to start this talk with a tweet. I want to get to the conclusion that software testing should really be part of your application, like the feature, like the code that you write. Because when you write an application, when you write a front-end app in Angular, or whatever, when you write a software, you are trying to respond to a question, to a requirement, to a request. Okay, can be a request from the client, can be a request from your community, can be a request from yourself. You try to respond to a request, writing a software. And how can you be sure that your answer is correct for that request that you got? You test it. You cannot just simply blindly deliver your software to the client and say, oh, okay, this software will just respond to your request. No, you have to test it. Maybe you can test it manually, but in the end, it's just a test. You tested that your solution works manually, maybe. And writing a software test is just adding automation to the test that you anyway will do manually. Okay. And this tweet by Guillermo Rauch, which is the creator of Next.js and the founder of Vercel, really changed my perspective about software testing. And there's also a really good talk by Kent C. Dodds, which starts from the same quote. And I want to do quite the same thing. Analyze the 3 sentences separately and get to the conclusion that's really important to add, to have and integrate tests into your app. So let's start with the most obvious one, write tests. So what is software testing? This is a definition that you can find on the IBM website. Okay, they have this page about software testing with lots of references and the history of software testing. I think the most important part is the first sentence you can find in the first paragraph. Software testing is the process of validating and verifying that the software does what it was created for. This may seem obvious, but it's the key, because this is the only way to make sure that you wrote the correct app for your needs. Okay, and so this is the only way to test it. Also, we have several types of testings, and of course today we will focus on functional testing, which is the process of taking the requirements, the functional requirements of your app, and emulate a real scenario. Of course, using a browser, because we are talking about Angular and front-end world. So using a browser, we can emulate a real-world scenario and test that the requirement that we got from our client are respected, writing and using these tests. The second part is not too many, because if you think about it, when you think about tests, you think about numbers, because you think, what is the coverage of my application? Did I write enough tests to cover all my code base? Maybe you have automated pipelines that fails when you don't reach the right number. Maybe you can stop at 70, 80, 100%, but numbers should not really guide you in understanding how many tests should you write, because again, the main thing about software testing is making sure that your app works and respects requirements. So the requirements should guide you through adding tests, not numbers. And I know that sometimes when you write tests, you are trying to cover as many lines in your code as you can. Also, you are testing maybe your implementation. You're exposing private methods. You are doing something weird just to being able to cover your lines, cover your branches, cover your functions. But that's not what should guide you. You should be guided by the requirements and not by the numbers and the lines of your code. Take this example. This is a PR in the Angular repo, okay? And you may think I'm just flexing that I'm a contributor of the Angular code base core. You are right, but I'm also using this as an example, because this is a really small PR, and this is really all about this feature, okay? I'm just refactoring a tiny function of the HTTP module and the HTTP param object, okay? It's the it's the standard encoding, okay? It's a function about the encoding. And this is all the PR. In order to pass the code review and the automated pipelines, I had to add the test, of course, okay? And the test is this one. This is a jest test, okay? But this test, if you look at it, it's maybe not respecting the core, the main principle of software testing, because I'm not testing that the app is working, the requirements are respected. I'm just testing the implementation. I'm taking a couple of scenarios. One is really simple with standard characters, and the second is a bit more complex with a couple of non-standard characters. And running this test, if this test passes, I'm sure that in only these two cases, my code is correct. But I'm not sure that the implementation is correct, and that integrating this piece of code into a running application will not break anything. I reach 100% coverage with this test, but this is telling me nothing about the correctness of my answer to the requirement. Okay, because if you think about what the HTTP request user story is, this is quite complex. Okay, you start from the browser and go to a server, and you have many things between. And if you think of what my function is doing, it's just a tiny fraction of this complex user story. So yeah, I'm unit testing this function, but I'm not sure that the implementation is correct. When I take my implementation and integrate it with a complex software, I'm not sure that together components will work. And I can end up with something like this, where taking pieces isolated, maybe they are designed correctly, but when I put them together, it's a mess. And think about this question. If your app has 100% code coverage, are you sure that everything will work as expected? Why? Why not? Think about it. So, what's the right number? Uh, you also know that the closer you get, or that you're trying to get to 100%, the more you have to, the more effort it's needed to get to a higher number, okay? But is there a correct number? Should I stop at 70? Should I stop at 80? Should I configure my pipeline to warn me if my coverage is below a threshold? The answer is it depends, of course. It depends on what you are doing. If you are designing a library, if you're designing a complex application. For example, if you're designing a library for NPM, maybe it's 1, 2 functions, and maybe you can easily reach 100% coverage, and that's fine. But if you're writing a complex app in e-commerce, it's really hard to get to 100%. So this should not be your goal. Your goal, again, should be your functional requirements are respected and tested. That's not the correct number. And the last part is about what should I test? And I think what you should test is the integration. So if you have time and budget to dedicate to testing, you should choose to dedicate it to the integration. And in the Angular world, in the front-end world, the integration is really about the browser, because you are integrating components, you're letting components communicate with each other. You can, of course, test components in isolation. You can do component testing. You can also unit test components with Jest, with other tools. But to make sure that your requirements are respected, you have to test your components in integration. And the best way to do that is to use the browser, because the Angular app lives in the browser. So you have to use it to test it. Of course, we have many ways to show what our test framework is composed of. And this is maybe the most famous one by Martin Fowler. You have this big unit test at the base, which, of course, unit tests are fast to write and execute, and also cheaper. Then you go up in this pyramid, and you find the service, which is basically testing the endpoints, for example, with HTTP calls. You test the response of your HTTP calls. And then at the top, you find the UI testing, which is, of course, testing the browser, which is slower to write and execute. And they are also more expensive, because when you execute your end-to-end test in a UI environment, you have to come with a complete browser, complete environment. So they're more expensive. Okay, and there are also variation of this. You can find this one, which is an evolution with many more layers. And I like that at the top you find the manual testing, because when you are in an enterprise environment, if you have an enterprise client, of course you will have a QA team, people that manually will test your app. So you have to know that at the top of your pyramid there are people that will test your app. So I think this is really close to a real world scenario, okay? And even closer to a real world scenario, you have this test Dorito. I will read this for you. You have the test I plan to write, then you have test I start writing, then you have test I delete because I decide they are stupid and take more time than they are worth, and then there are the actual tests. I think this is really close to a real world. And then talking about can see dots, what I grabbed from his talk and blog post you can find here in this link. This is the testing trophy. What I found interesting here is that he had this static base, and statically testing your code. This really should be a part of your testing framework always. With static testing, we mean like type check. TypeScript gives us a way to statically type checking our code for free. But then we have linters, we have ESLint, we have prettier, and that's a way of testing your app. You're statically testing your code. Also, you can test your code with a code review. It's a manual test, but it's also it's always a test. It should be part of your testing framework. Okay, and I like that the integration part. It's the bigger one. Okay, because I think that's really important. Also, end-to-end is here is separated from the integration, but again, in the Angular world, I think that integration and end-to-end should really be maybe the same thing, because you have to test in a browser, and so you use end-to-end functional test. But you can come up with your own version of this. For example, I came up with my own, and it's this one. You take what you need, okay? It's really beautiful on the big screen, okay? You take what you need. Maybe you like it to take a cut of unit test, type check, linting. I added also code review and QA. Why? Because maybe you are just prototyping an app. You are starting. You are in a startup. You have to rapidly prototyping something, and then so you don't have the time and budget to focus on end-to-end testing, or you don't have the budget to call a QA, to form a QA team. Okay, so you pick what you can. You pick something from the unit test cut. Okay, so it depends on your needs. You should, to me, the best thing you should do is to use really powerful tool like Cypress to do end-to-end tests, which I think is the most important part. Also, we will see that integrating it into an Angular app is really easy. But you can take what you need, okay? And so, again, making sure that your app really does what it was created for is really important. And when you write a feature, write something, deliver something to your customer, it cannot be done without testing it, because otherwise you don't know if you are delivering the right thing. So writing a feature and writing its test, it's really the same thing, should be really connected, okay? In Angular, end-to-end testing, last year we had this RFC in the Protractor code base. They were talking about the future of Protractor. You know that Protractor was the end-to-end testing tool in Angular, and now it's deprecated. Protractor is based on Selenium, which is a tool, a software that was born even before Angular. So now we have new software, we have new tools, and after this RFC, the Angular team integrated new tools, end-to-end tools in Angular. So you can find this blog post by Mark Tom last year, and they talked about the future of Protractor. And after the RFC, they decided to deprecate Protractor and include Cypress, WebDriver IO, and Test Cafe as alternatives to in new Angular projects. And this year, on August 10, there's this blog post, the state of end-to-end testing with Angular. And so now, in the Angular CLI, when you start a new project or you're trying to add end-to-end to your app, you can choose between Cypress, Nightwatch, and WebDriver IO. And in the Angular documentation, you can find a migration guide for Playwright as well. So now they deprecated Protractor, and now you can easily add the Cypress to an Angular app just by typing ng-e2e, and we will see how. Cypress. What's Cypress? Basically, it's a tool. It's a company, okay? Cypress.io is a company founded in 2015, and the Cypress software is composed of two main parts, the test runner and the dashboard. The test runner is what you use to run your tests. It's a command line interface, so you get a command line like Jest, okay? You run your tests in command line, you see the output on your console. But you also have a graphical interface. It's the same thing, but you have a graphical interface. You can see what your browser is doing. And then you have also a Cypress dashboard, which is an online service that you can use. You can integrate it with your pipeline, with your command line, with your continuous integration, and use it to see what's going on with your tests. It's also a paid service. And today, since we are trying to integrate Cypress in our continuous integration, I thought that the best way to show that is to use GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is a platform to add continuous integration to your project. Okay, in GitHub, you have these workflows that you can easily integrate into your code base, and you have a marketplace of actions. You can pick different actions and integrate really easily into your code base to automatically do things when you push code or you do something like open a PR, merging a PR. You can automate things, and there's a marketplace. Some actions are maintained by the GitHub core team, and like checkout and the artifact upload and download. And there's an official Cypress GitHub action, so it's really easy to pick the GitHub the Cypress action, integrate it into your workflow, and everything is really easy. With this action, with the Cypress action, you have the npm installation, the caching, and also other configuration options. Okay, so the demo. Okay, so I want to first show you what happens when you first run ng-e2e in a new Angular project or in a project without end-to-end enabled. Okay, when you run ng-e2e, you can choose. You have this question. Okay, you can choose between these three tools. We chose Cypress here, and then the package installation, the npm installation starts. So here, the Cypress schematics is just installing your package, the package that your app will need, and then updating the code base. It's updating, you see, it's updating the package JSON, the Angular JSON, and also creating a new folder, the Cypress folder in your root application. And this is where Cypress will live in your app. So if you look at the app, okay, so we have a simple app here, the Tour of Heroes, okay, Angular Day edition. So it's a simple app, and we want to test with Cypress that this app is working. So I wrote a couple of tests. Here we have this test. I hope it's okay. This is what you see when you open a Cypress test. Okay, it's really similar to a Jest code base, and this is the Cypress API. Okay, so you are controlling a browser here. You're asking the browser to perform some actions and what you expect after this action. So the first test is really simple. We just want to visit the home page and make sure that we find this string. Okay, so using using Cypress, we can just run this command. We are running a command here to use the Cypress command line, which is also what your continuous integration will probably do. So we are calling Cypress with the end-to-end command, headless, so without a graphical interface, using Chrome as a browser, because we want Cypress to use Chrome, exiting at when he finished, and without the watcher, okay? So this is what happens when you run your test. You find this report. It's just really similar to what you find with Jest or other testing tools. Okay, so for every test, it's doing something in the background, and you find the output in the end. So here, it's saying that something is failing. Okay, and in the report and in command line, you see that you have what's failing. Okay, because it was expecting to find some content, and it was not able to find this content. And what's interesting about Cypress is that okay. So here we have my first test it's green, and then the hero selection test with 3 tests. First one is green, second one is green, but the third one is not. So something is failing, and we see that we have this file specs CY with 4 tests, 3 are passing and 1 is failing. And we know from this report what is failing, but we also want to see why this is failing. And Cypress offers us this really cool thing. Don't worry about the finder, but this is a screenshot of what happens when the test failed. Okay, and this is also the same thing that you can find in your continuous integration. So when something fails, you find a screenshot of the exact same instant when your test failed. Okay, and you find a screenshot of the situation of your app when the test failed. But not only a screenshot, but also a video. Okay, when something fails, you also can find a video of the test when the test fails. Okay, so you see exactly the entire user journey of the browser from start to the end. So when it fails, you find this video, and you can see exactly what's going on using the video. And this same thing, when you move to GitHub and you create your pipelines, you create your actions, you integrate your actions in your app. When you see when something went wrong in your actions, you see there that I'm running an action, I'm running a job, and this job failed. So the Cypress sign is red. When the job fails, I can find 2 zip files here, screenshot and videos. And when I download these 2 files, I will find inside this zip file the screenshot. Okay, the exact same screenshot that I showed you before in my command line. So the thing that you can do in your local environment, you can also do in your continuous integration, because you have screenshots and video and you can download them. And the last part is about the graphical interface that you have with Cypress. If you just run E2E without parameters, it will open this graphical interface. Of course, you can install different browsers. Here, the standard browsers you find are Chrome and Electron. If your operating system have this installed. So if you select Chrome and you start your tests, okay, you see that it's running every test. I don't know why it's not failing, but it's just it's executing every test. Okay, now it's not failing, but it's not important. Because I know why it's failing, because the app was not running. Now, when you run ng2a, it also runs the app. It was not surfing, okay? But now Angular is serving the app. It was just a cache in the browser. So now it's not failing. And so you see every test on this column, and you can see for each test what's happening. And also, everything is blocked. Let's restart. Yeah, the demo effect. Let's see. Okay. So if you want to see what happened with like this test, you can open this test and see for each step what the browser was doing. Okay, so you go down and you see, for example, here we are visiting the home page. Here we are getting the A items. We are getting sure that it contains this string, and then we click. So you see what happens. You change page, you are testing the URL, okay, for each step. And also, you can open the test in VS Code directly from the interface. So I open the test that I clicked on in my VS Code. And the last interesting feature is that, to me, is that you can add new tests directly from the interface. So if I click this, it's an experimental feature, okay? So, no. So yeah, if I add a new test here, I can use this this tool to just prepare my test. For example, if I want to visit the home page, I want to write something here like the A. I select something. I go to this page, and then, for example, I click here. Okay, and when I save these comments, I can give a name to this test, save it, and then it created a new test here on my runner. Now it's running every test here, and this test is run as like the others, okay? And if I click on this test, I can open it in my VS Code, and it generated the code for this test. It's just a way to bootstrap new tests without having to write everything, okay? You can start from this and then expand it as you like. Thank you. So thank you. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to ask questions in my social channels or drop me an email if you need some more information.
Thank you. Thank you, Edo. We have a few minutes for some question. Okay, I saw there first.
Okay, thank you. How about end-to-end testing in Safari?
You can do that.
Cypress?
With Cypress, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. With Cypress, I'm not really sure. But I have Cypress installed in this laptop, and it's not showing up, so I don't think it can be controlled by Cypress. Maybe you know better. Okay, they're working on it.
Hello. So my question is about when to write tests. Right?
When?
Yeah, because it's easy to answer that when you're writing unit tests. It's easier to answer that question when you're writing integration tests. But when it comes to end-to-end testing, especially in the workflow we have, Agile, so small stories, which build a big feature, so the main problem is, when do I write a test for that feature? Which
it depends.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. To me, you can apply the same principles that you can find in test-driven development. Okay. So if you have this pattern, if you first write unit tests and then your code, you can do the same with end-to-end. It's also easier because you don't have to call functions that don't exist. Okay. You have to just control a browser. So you can write a test in Cypress, even a small feature, okay? Write a test in Cypress, which will fail, but it's just what you expect to happen in a browser, okay? So you write it, in my opinion, you should write it just when you begin, because if you're working in we're talking about an enterprise scenario in which you have big sprints and features, not just a prototype or a library, okay? But a complex application. So you will have features with scenarios, test cases, okay? So you can simply take these test cases, write them in Cypress, and they will fail, but then as you write your feature, the test will be green. So I think this is a good approach to have test-driven development, but with a browser, okay, in the context of a front-end application. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. More questions? We still have a couple minutes. Any more questions? Okay.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edoardo.